Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're going to take a look at a brand new rifle instead of an old one. This is a DeserTech MDR, which they say stands for Micro Dynamic Rifle. I think I'll ignore that and just call it an MDR for the duration of the video. This is a rifle that has been in development for quite some time. It was first unveiled at SHOT Show in, I think, 2014. And has only just recently really gotten into commercial sale. So I'm not sure exactly what took the time, but I can certainly understand it taking a couple of years to get design and production of a gun up and running. I think that's something a lot of people don't fully appreciate is first off, the amount of time it requires to make a reliable semi-auto rifle, and I'm assuming this one is. I have not actually fired it yet. Also, then the time that it takes to go from having a hand-built or a couple of hand-built prototypes over to having an actual production line. There are a tremendous number of engineering issues involved in that transition. Very much an underrated part of firearms design, I think. And at any rate, they appear to have finally gotten all of that worked out. They're selling the rifles now. It is chambered for 7.62 NATO. They apparently are planning to have a conversion kit to 5.56 NATO available, I think actually pretty much now, like any day now it should be out and available, and in theory also a 300 blackout conversion. So they're all going to use the same basic frame, they're all going to work the same way, so we're going to take a look at the 308 because it does a couple things that are pretty neat. There are a couple of endemic issues with bullpup rifles, and as a left-hander, I'm probably at the core of several of them. Actually, I guess there are really two. The first one is ejection. You either have to have some sort of system for ejecting cases not straight out the side of the gun, or an easy way to swap the gun from left to right side ejection. You can't just, with a standard traditional firearm, the ejection port's up front, so basically, as long as the cases don't go backwards when you fire, it can eject out either side, left hand, right hand, doesn't matter. Bullpups, it does matter. There are some, like the British L85, that are simply completely incompatible with left-handed shooting, and if you try to shoot it left-handed, you will get a charging handle right in your face and split your lip open. Didn't happen to me personally, but secondhand story. Blood all over the rifle, not a good day. Anyway, the MDR has a really cool setup for that, which we'll take a look at. And then the other thing that not a whole lot of, that's particularly difficult to do in conjunction with a clever ejection setup is being able to just look in the chamber. So these sorts of bullpups often have issues of how do you tell if the thing's loaded? You have to go through some weird contortions. If it's a forward ejecting gun like an F2000 or a Keltec RDB, you have to like flip the gun over and pull the magazine out and look up inside the magazine well, or pop the little toilet bowl cover on the F2000. Again, DesertTech has a clever, interesting solution to that. So let's dig right into this, pull it apart, and show you how it works. A couple things off the bat. The bipod is not part of the rifle. This is a Magpul bipod that I put on there so it would stand up nicely, and because I've been wanting to experiment with one of those bipods. The magazine is a standard 308 P-Mag. That's cool. That makes things nice and easy. The optic is on here. This is kind of an interesting choice, an interesting aspect of the design. This looks like it's a copy of a Burris Fastfire. It's actually not specifically a Fastfire, but it's something like that. It's one of the little micro red dots. And this shipped with the rifle. Now, you'll notice it's got this little teeny kind of really weirdly small mount in comparison to the rifle, and it's mounted to a single block of Picatinny rail right there that's not the receiver or the handguard. And the reason for that is this is actually directly mounted on the barrel. You'll see that when we pull the barrel out, which means that it retains zero perfectly when you remove and reattach the barrel, because right on the barrel. So that's actually kind of a cool feature. Like, this is done in lieu of iron sights. So I think when we start shooting this substantially, we will take this thing off and replace it with probably some sort of different optic, but we're going to go ahead and start with that guy on there and see how it runs. I like the fact that all of the controls are ambidextrous. We have a safety that drops nicely under the thumb here. That's safe. That's fire. We have a magazine release that is, actually you've got 3 magazine release controls. So you've got a button on the front of the trigger guard, left and right, and that actually can be reached from a firing grip, and you push in both sides. So it's a really, you'll see how it works in a sec. It's a slick system. And then we also have kind of the traditional Bullpup magazine release, which is here on the front of the magazine well. So if you want to do it that way, you can grab the magazine like so, depress the button, it's a little stiff, and pull this out. I like the fact that it's a little stiff because one of the failings, one of the issues with a lot of the Bullpups with this kind of design is the possibility to accidentally drop the magazine with rearward pressure from your hand. This is far enough back that that's unlikely to happen, and it's stiff enough that it's really, really unlikely to happen. I don't see that ever being a problem. You then have a bolt release button back here. So this will lock open on an empty magazine. Like so, and then when you drop the button, closes the bolt. It looks like it ought to have a little storage section in the pistol grip, but if that's what that actually is, it is so tight and difficult to remove that I was unable to get into it. I kind of marred it up with a pair of pliers. I don't think, so yeah, practical matters, not a storage area. All right, now let's get on to the mechanical bits. We have ejection that can be swapped from side to side extremely easily. There are 2 plates on the side of the rifle. One of them is static. I have already set this up to be left-handed, and the other is your actual ejection port. There's a little cover on the front of it right there. Once we pop this open, cases eject forward out of this thing. And let's start by taking a look at how that works. So I can remove this by pushing this button in and lifting up, and this holds our spent cases. Let's see, best way to do this is probably pull them both off, show them to you, and then put them back on and demonstrate them. This is the actual ejection mechanism. Now what's neat about this design is that it actually ejects cases laterally. They don't pivot out of the, or off of the bolt, they just slide straight up, well, straight off the side of the bolt. So you can see that there is no recessed area for the case head there. We have an extractor on the top, and then a bolt that is free to slide side to side. There is then a lug on the bolt, and when the bolt travels rearward, unlocking, opening, pulling the empty cartridge out, it's going to push this lever down, which is going to push out this sort of scissor type two bar ejector right there. And that is going to physically shove the cartridge case sideways off the bolt face and into this guy. Let's see, that's going to be facing this direction. So that is going to slide it right into there. This little spring tab holds it in place. And then when the bolt goes forward, there's another lug on the opposite side. So when the bolt goes forward again, it's going to chamber the next cartridge to fire, and the lug on the side is going to push this case forward, right out that ejection port and out of the gun. So it's a clever system, and in addition to just the cool design, it has this added feature that it's ejecting the cases right out the front, and this is far enough forward that in order to just switch shoulders for a temporary thing, for a few shots, MDR or DesertTech designed this, as far as I can tell, with military applications in mind. Like, there are some small militaries out there that are concerned about would like to use 308 because of armor penetration capabilities. And so there is potentially a military market for this rifle, which is kind of unusual. With 5.56 rifles isn't really the case. At any rate, in a military setting, there are certainly times when you would want to switch shoulders and shoot this thing off of your left or right to go around a corner the tactically correct direction. And while you can easily swap this from left hand to right hand eject simply by swapping these two on different sides of the gun, you don't even actually have to, because your face is kind of resting back here, and this ejects straight forward, so you don't even have to switch this around, which is pretty cool. All right, so I've got an empty case in the bolt face here. which I should be able to feed. And then one of the other problems that I mentioned with a bullpup is being able to check the chamber. Well, there's this little front cutout that doesn't have to be there for ejection purposes. This is actually a window into your ejection port. So, there we go. When you've got the rifle in battery, chambered, you can just do a little bit of basically a press check, and you have to get the light right, but you can see that there's a brass cartridge case in there. This is a little bit easier in the real world than it is on camera, but you've got that little window, and so you can do a press check on this kind of like you would do on a traditional rifle and not have to flip this thing over, look in through the magazine well, or do some other weirdness to chamber check it. And that is a really cool element. Now, to take a closer look at that ejection mechanism, when we pull the bolt back, right in there, you can see those two fingers lifting up, and they're going to push the cartridge case off of the bolt face. You can see them there at full extension with the bolt locked open. I've got an empty cartridge case on the bolt face, and when I open this up, we will be able to see it pop out. This actually takes a fair amount of force to do, so you can't do it gently and slowly, but there it goes, and you can see those two ejectors lifting up. If I reinstall the other side ejector plate and do it again, we are now going to have our empty case stuck inside, well, locked inside this ejector plate. I don't know if I can pull this out with the bolt back. Yeah, all right. So, yep, there it is. And then when the bolt goes back forward, I have it locked to the rear right now, the lug on the bolt will kick this forward and out. And I can show you that as well. So just let this down, bloop, and there it goes. That is one kind of quirk of this thing. If you shoot a magazine empty, the bolt will lock open when you fire the last round, but it will leave the last case in this side port of the rifle. So when you load the next magazine and drop the bolt, it will kick that empty case out at that point. Or if you just drop the bolt administratively, it will kick the empty case out. All right, enough of goofy ejection hijinks. Let's go ahead and actually take this apart. The rifle comes with a single tool, which has a star wrench on one end and a hex wrench on the other, and this is all you need to completely take the thing apart, which is pretty cool. We also have a series of captive pins. So we'll start with the front handguard. There is a star style of screw, one on either side. We just have to loosen those. And those are basically M-lock screws that help to lock the handguard in place. Note that you also have M-lock attachments on the side and on the bottom. That's how I've put the bipod on there. Once I've loosened these two, you don't want to actually take them out, just loosen them. Then we can punch this pin through. Tool's good for that. There we go. And it is captive there. Once that's out, then there we go. Handguard comes off. You can see the two little the M-lock style locking pieces right in here that just lock the handguard into place along with the cross pin at the bottom. Next step is to remove the barrel. So I'm going to go ahead and lock the bolt open. And then we've got 3 screws on this side. You have a lock and unlock, and this is actually just a cross pin that has a flat on it. So in the unlock position, the barrel can come out. But you always want to undo these 2 screws first. So they tell you don't mess with the locking screw until these 2 tension screws are loosened. So these we just loosen about a turn. There we go. That's loosened the trunnion, and then we'll take this and go from locked to unlocked. There's a little click, and there's a little notch in the screw right there that tells you which position it's in. And then the barrel comes out. There's that. Next step in disassembly is the lower, separating the polymer lower from the aluminum with steel reinforcing upper. We've got 3 pins in that, here, here, and here. Let's start with these 2, the rearward 2. Just pop them through. There we go. With these two pins removed, and they are captives, they don't actually come out loose, you can break this thing open kind of like an AR-15. If you don't want to separate the pieces, that's all you have to do. If you do want to separate the pieces, you just have a third pin right up here at the front. That one, at least on this rifle, is pretty darn tight. There we go. With that pin out, then the upper separates from the lower. We'll take a look at this in a moment. Now that we have our upper alone, we can go ahead and pull out the bolt and carrier assembly. So that's got an integral recoil spring, got a bit of a metal shield up there, and the upper assembly here, the upper receiver, is aluminum, but with steel inserts, or a steel insert. So the rails here that the bolt is riding on, those are steel. Here's your trunnion block. This is the two screws that you tighten before removing the barrel. That's a steel insert. This front one is actually our barrel lock mechanism. When I rotate it, you can see the flat right there. We'll leave that in the unlocked position. The charging handle is just a flat tray inside there. You can lock it in position by lifting it up, like that. The bolt assembly is quite simple. This takes basically the AR-15 idea of multiple small lugs, which means you only need a small bit of rotation angle in order to lock. And then we have the same sort of cam and cross pin system. To disassemble this, I'm going to push out that. There we go, that little guy. That's the firing pin retainer. We can then pull out, come on, there we go. We can pull out the firing pin. Then we can rotate the cross pin here. Pull that out, and then the bolt head comes off. Note that we have a big extractor on the top. We have a pair of lugs on the bottom for feeding a cartridge, but the bolt is flat across the side so that a cartridge can slide. It'll get picked up like so, but then it can be pushed laterally off the bolt face for ejection. In context here, these two lugs on the back of the bolt are what activate the ejection little scissory deal, and what then push the cartridge out the other side. The captive recoil spring is really nice. The idea that this all comes out as a unit is quite nice. The bolt is nice and simple. That's a good thing. Looking at the barrel here, we have an adjustable gas plug. It's a little difficult to read there, but there are actually 6 different settings to the gas system, and there's a little detent right there. So we can use a cartridge tip to rotate between those settings, although you do have to take the handguard off the gun in order to do it. This semicircular cross cut is where the barrel lock holds in, and then of course the 2 tensioning screws tighten this down in the trunnion to hold it firmly in place. Interesting to note, there is a hole right here that, see it there, that is just behind the chamber, and that is basically a vent hole in case you have an overpressure event, which would primarily most likely be caused by a bore obstruction, which will cause the cartridge case to fail or extract under very high pressure and then fail as soon as it comes out of the chamber. If that happens, gas will vent out that hole. From there, it will continue up through the matching little hole right here in the trunnion. You can see it right above my finger there. And then into the top section of the receiver up here, right up in that area. And we have a pair of blowout plugs here and here. So in case of a ruptured cartridge or a significant overpressure failure, gas will vent straight up here and out those 2 plugs, which are sufficiently in front of your face that that won't hurt you, and it will prevent catastrophic damage to the rifle. And that's a really nice safety mechanism to see installed. This is more than just, we're going to decide to try and armor the thing by putting a big steel plate inside next to the shooter's face. as I believe at least one Bullpup design did, and instead actually has a remediation, a way to remediate that problem. A little foam pad cheek rest is kind of nice too. A little incongruous on a military pattern rifle, but neat, nice, it's comfortable. A few things to look at on the lower receiver. This is all a polymer shell. I mentioned before that this is not an accessible storage compartment. However, if we look closely here, the pistol grip is actually a separate piece from the lower frame, and if we look down in there, you'll see a screw. So the pistol grip should actually be replaceable, and that's something that I know a lot of people will inevitably complain about. You know, everyone will decide that they don't like this pistol grip for any number of reasons, and they will want to replace it, and this normally would be one of those gripes that you hear when people just, you know, don't like the price of the rifle, and so they say things like, well, you know, I'd buy one if it didn't have that obnoxious pistol grip. Well, there are DesertTechs ahead of you because they put a replaceable pistol grip on. I don't know of anyone actually offering different ones yet, but that's planning in advance to support aftermarket features, which is a good idea. The magazine release button at the front is connected to this bar right here, which comes all the way back. There's an interaction right here with the rear magazine release, and when you push that all the way back, it's going to pull this lug out of the receiver and thus drop the magazine. So this is an L-shaped piece connected to that metal bit down there. When that goes down, this bar goes forward, which pulls this connecting bar forward, which runs all the way back to the actual release. The trigger is on the other side here, and it is just going to pull this connecting bar forward. Our safety is very simple in that you can see it brings that little lug up, so you can no longer pull the trigger far enough forward to release. Unfortunately, this trigger kind of sucks. The manual says this has a two-stage trigger. To my mind, this is really a single-stage trigger. You've got a little bit of slack just until the trigger catches up to this bar. But once you're there, you've got just one long, creepy sort of trigger pull until it releases. That bar, of course, comes all the way back here, where it meets up with the actual fire control group, and that bar pulls this connecting rod here backwards, like so, which is going to release the hammer to go forward. I was wondering what possibility there might be of some sort of aftermarket trigger for this to improve over what I think is, having not fired it at least, the weakest point to the gun, and that's the trigger. And much to my happiness, you can take this bar and it just comes off the hammer there. And then we have a plastic spring here. So if I pull this back, I can then pull the trigger pack out as a unit. So this is a nice, easy design for someone to create an aftermarket improvement to, should they want to. You've got basically just your one control here that releases, and then this is a metal, an aluminum frame or housing for the whole trigger group. So yeah, easy to duplicate the outside dimensions of that frame and create a new drop-in improved trigger, whether DesertTech wants to do that themselves, and they do have a corporate history of making a bunch of really high-end precision rifles, so I would think that a good trigger would be something they would appreciate, or if some other company wants to do it for them. Having taken the whole thing apart, now the obvious question is, well, that all looks fine and dandy. Does it actually work? So Carl and I are going to take this thing out to the range. In fact, by the time you watch this, we have taken it out to the range, and I'm filming this first. So I don't know yet how that's going to turn out. If you want to see our first impressions shooting video, head on over to InRange TV and take a look at that. It will be up today, the same day that this video publishes. So you'll find a link in the description and at the in the end screen of this video. Check it out, and hopefully the thing runs great, because it seems like a pretty cool design. Thanks for watching.